The time that I'm talking about, Rosalind, teenage years. So you can imagine what that was like. A friend of mine called me this week and said, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Well, I'm off to Washington." "And why are you going?" "Well, I'm going to a birthday party with my friend Rosalind." She said, "I know her. She was ahead of me in high school. Wasn't she rather a wild thing?" And I said, "I don't know." Well, she said, "How did you get to know her?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you. Rosalind and I went to a camp north of Toronto. I didn't know her, and I didn't think that she knew me. She was down a few cabins from me, and I was standing alone in my cabin one day, and all of a sudden, the door flung wide open. This wild thing came in and said, 'You are going to be my friend.' With that, she threw her arms around my shoulder, made me skip down the path, took me to her cabin, and said, 'This is my new friend.'" Roz and I had such different personalities. You know what she's like. But you know, for some unknown reason, we became very, very close and spent many, many times all through high school. I seem to have a lot of friends that boss me around, and Roz actually topped the list. She would call me and say, "My family's having a party, you have to be there." So, of course, one time, these are the things I have to tell you, I mean, this is what I remember about her. One time I went down to her house, and having been to an old girls' school, I opened the door, saw the most gorgeous group of men I've ever laid eyes on. Wasn't used to that, and there in the center of the room was Rosalind in her extravagant sense. I don't know whether she knew any of these men before she got there, but she certainly knew them all when she left. And you know, she was a very good girl that day because her parents were at home. However, there was another party, and her parents traveled a lot, and they simply weren't there. She called me and she said, "Janet, you have to come to a party." I said, "Okay. Bring your boyfriend. We're going to Cobourg." And Cobourg's a place where her parents had a spot. And we used to go up alone all the time. But this time, I was to bring my boyfriend. So I arrived, and there the place was filled with masses of people, women and men. And quite frankly, I don't remember a lot about the party, except I don't remember what we ate. I don't know if we drank. I wouldn't tell you if we did. And the thing was, it went on forever. It was all day, all night, all the next day. I don't know what we did at night, but I wouldn't tell you about that either. Anyway, the next day, the house had to have gotten cleaned, and it did. And then Rosalind turned around and said, "You all have to go home." So we lined up, car one after the other. And she had a boyfriend that had this really neat convertible. I was so envious. And she sat in it and threw her arms out, which was very typical. Actually, she reminded me of that Bridget Jones diary. Remember when Renee and Hugh Grant were going off for a weekend? I don't know what Roz was doing when she left, but she threw out her arms and looked exactly the same and said, "Au revoir, we'll see you all later." The only other thing I remember is she called one day, and she didn't order me around. She said, "Would you like to come to Bermuda with me?" Roz's family went to Bermuda, I think every year, didn't they? So I was so pleased when my parents said we could go, or I could go. We got down there. We had carte blanche. We could do anything we wanted. Although we had to meet Rosalind's mother and father at dinner every night. We had to be dressed in the dining room. So, of course, we did. And when we got there, Mabel and George would ask us what we had done for the day. Well, we had motorbiked, and we lay in the sun putting lots of oil on ourselves so we would turn quite brown. And then they would say, "Well, what are you doing tonight?" We'd say, "Oh, I don't know. We might go back to the room. We're not really quite sure." As soon as we finished dinner, we excused ourselves, tore out of there, and went howling. We wound up, I don't know whether it was hotels or bars or what, but you know, we got in there, and again, I watched her. She was just like a fridge magnet. It's the only way I can describe her. She walked in, and these guys just gravitated to her. You don't remember it? I remember it, because I stood on the sidelines watching and thought, "I'm no fridge magnet." Anyway, she was very vivacious, just, herself. But, she was very wise. She was really in control of the situation, never let anyone take advantage of her. But you know, I was thinking, Roz wasn't always what I've described. She had quite a serious side to her too, which doesn't sound like it, but it was true. We spent a lot of time in each other's homes, and Roz was at my home, and for some reason my mother just loved her. And they must have started talking about school one day, and I'm not sure, was it chemistry you had such a bad time with? You don't remember?
Mathematics.
Oh my God. Maybe it was mathematics, but nevertheless, my mother had been a pharmacist 75 years ago. It was quite remarkable. And she said to Roz, would you like me to help you? I sat in that room and watched Roz, and it was so out of character. She sat there, she was so focused. My mother was gentle with her, which was really quite a surprise because they have a very similar personality. And she passed. She did very well. On the other side of the coin, I was not as academic as Roz. I had a terrible time with history. We weren't at the same school, but we were taking the same subject. I had this horrible history teacher. She'd walk in the room and she'd write questions on the board and send you home and say, get the answers. And this went on day after day, and I just couldn't take it. I passed notes, or I talked to my friends, or I got kicked out of class, or whatever. But as the year went on, I got really, really worried. I was afraid that I wasn't going to pass, and we had to have 9 subjects to get into university. So I called Roz one day, and I said, Roz, I'm really scared. I'm not going to get into university. What's wrong? It's history. Oh, she said, take my notes, read them, and you'll pass. I said, okay. And when I got those notes, I was quite surprised. For someone who was so carefree, everything was systematic and orderly. Point, dash, 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 point, dash, dash, dash. I was dumbfounded. And I looked at them, I thought, I can do this. I'm good at memory work. And so I didn't get an A. I didn't get a B. But I passed. So Roz has to know that she was partly responsible for me getting to university. Thank you, Roz. Let me stop talking?
No. Okay, that's